did see
I can
call them.
I can play piano really
Advertising
slow.
on Facebook.
And if it's something
They
you
had
know,
the
yeah.
strawberries there.
Already?
So
Wow.
I had-
I'm surprised with such little sun.
I'm shocked because with all the rain we had.
Right.
Very.
Exactly.
Storm Graybill.
Oh yeah. Stuart tried it downtown for a little while,
Oh, yes.
but it didn't work out too well for him.
At the bottom, I had no clue. I
He had
just
the
knew
best
this
of
is where it was
intentions.
on the piano.
Oh, I know. It's just.
But the pandemic and the timing was tough.
Timing, I mean, we were talking about that
Oh, she could
before.
only, that was before she
With
quit.
people coming out,
She quit the top of
things
it.
have changed. I see it at the
But it would
grocery
be like,
store.
oh,
where
she
Hi,
is-
guys.
Hello.
How are ya?
Good,
how are
Right.
you?
And
Hi,
I see
how are
store
you?
personnel.
And churches,
Yes.
they didn't come back.
They did not come back.
I like those stone
And they're
benches.
still streaming, they're still. And it's just, things are just changing.
It's tough.
It's a harder thing to, but I'm shocked sometimes when I see these, I'm thinking like, boy, that person's got a lot. And then I see
graduation
they've
down.
got the
One down, one to go.
tops or women's outfit on and they're shopping for people.
Right, right.
And
Delivering it in the parking lot.
right,
Teddy and
and why is
Carson.
that a big thing?
Because this-
And that eliminates all the impulse
Teddy's
buying.
gonna play
Yes.
her little graduation.
Which I
Oh,
understand.
oh,
Going to a place like Wegmans,
Allegedly,
I wasn't gonna buy that, but that was cool.
Right.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
So then we also started thinking, oh, Teddy and Carson are in the same class in school.
But, you know, the thing is, for vegetables and such, I don't
Much
pick
like
up my
when
own.
you and
I don't
Carson
want.
were
Right.
10, the
Yeah.
other one.
Uh,
We graduated on the
And
same
even
day.
sometimes at the deli,
Yeah.
I see them like doing orders and I'm thinking, who are they doing it for? They're doing it for people who have called in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
pretty far away, yeah. I know,
I know how Olean works. If I
Welcome
get
back
enough
there.
money squirreled away, we can get it moved.
Thanks for coming out tonight.
You're welcome.
Let's move it till 1 o'clock. Here's an envelope.
Remember when I did
That's right.
About 40 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So,
I had some friends that lived down there.
you
At the
think
lake?
we should go with the six?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're very
But
pretty down there.
no.
It
seven.
is.
Keep it at
It
the
is.
7.
Yeah,
Even though you're not there.
I mean,
Yeah.
I could,
At Rushford, the places are a
We've set
little
up, I
farther
think, help
apart
set
in
up
a
and
lot of
somebody
spots than they are here at Lime Lake.
Lime
Lime Lake's they're right on top of
Okay.
each other.
Okay, I think that's,
Cottonwoods going everywhere.
It's just like
Yeah.
heaps of.
Yeah.
and I
Sides
can
of the world.
bring,
And their museum down there, I
Sydney
got one of their
or,
instruments and I paid
what's,
to have it
John-
restored.
John-
And I
Yeah,
said,
but Don,
Evan.
Don Ganis
I
came
can
out
bring
to visit.
Evan
Oh,
to see
yeah,
you.
he just, I guess he had to do
And
some
Ariel.
final
Don't
things
have
for
it
Jesus
Ariel,
sitting after it's
Estates,
been
so we saw
restored.
him and Kathy
You
and
know,
I spent more time
if you
with
don't
him.
Which would be
We
fine.
did, but,
Oh.
I'd rather do it on,
it's in,
And
on
I've had a
Sunday.
couple calls throughout the years, like,
because
Geez, you gotta
of
Must be
these-
like
yeah,
wind.
that makes sense.
They go in some.
Because they won't
stuff,
be back
you know, and they go,
No.
so he's gonna go
of the
to.
following
one
week.
place
So,
to Florida,
preserve
you know.
it.
What is it?
So
We can actually set up before
like
So
this,
the concept
except
one
it's
is
yeah,
to
we'll
go
set
to
up
the
in the
band
morning,
or
and it's a
they
presentation.
whatever.
Oh.
They won whatever,
Very,
and then
very
they go
rare
on to,
instrument.
it's
And
called
it cost a lot to have it restored.
Beta,
It was like
the Beta.
$2,500, and I paid for it.
But
It sounds like it's similar
Yeah.
to
And
Odyssey or.
they said, you know, but you, once it's preserved, and just like your flag.
Right, right. I wonder if it belonged to a veteran from there in Rushford. Maybe.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, how many volunteers did she,
15. We
The
need
second floor
15.
of their
Okay.
museum, they have like a little band room up there.
Oh, okay.
And I had a
And
friend
who
go through
else
there and he
did
goes, oh,
we-
they've got this, oh, that's nice, they've got this, oh, that's nice. And then he mentioned this
Well,
one, I was like,
Uh,
stop!
It's really
Neil
nice.
and Jen,
okay.
Time to make a visit.
So even though it's metal, the lack of
Because
heat would.
it's all
If you
nickel
have
silver,
to.
or German silver,
And then
so
you've
just
got
like this instrument. It's
Jess
not silver plated
and Bob.
brass, it's
So
all
we're at
nickel
9.
silver, and the temperature change can really affect it.
now,
And if it gets too hot, it'll crack. If it gets too cold.
oh yeah, Peggy's coming.
it's
Oh,
very-
really?
Yeah.
So the metal itself is sensitive.
It's that
Yes.
thin.
Oh.
And I think she's gonna have
It's not
her
like instruments today.
granddaughter,
I mean, I
so
could literally
Isabella
crush
might be
this.
able to help us someday.
I might have a heart attack doing it, but
Interesting. And is that other thing to the left a parade staff?
Yes, it is.
So we're
And it's actually half drum bass. It's probably
Oh.
Mexican War or War of 1812.
Uh-huh.
So,
Is that a brass ball?
yes, and originally this gold was, it did have the gold leaf on
Gold
it.
leaf?
But, and it is plain Jane as it looks. The earliest ones were that way. It's just like old drums. The scragglier looking the eagle is, generally that means it's older.
Mm-hmm.
And if a Rev War drum will definitely not have as beautiful an eagle as a Civil War drum. So, but I just thought it was kind of neat because you don't see things like that pop up.
Right, right. So it's actually a drumstick also? Or
No, it's
just a parade
the
staff?
leader.
Just a parade staff?
Yep. Just the drum bass to, and then a musician's sword. They use special swords, and they were basically just for decoration,
Okay,
unless things really got out of hand.
as a last resort.
And these are musician swords, some of them have a metal scab.
Oh,
So many of them are just rotted out. And this
Yeah.
one,
I
somebody
really
took
think I
really
might
good
have
care of
a
it.
mommy and a baby behind the house there. A deer.
Oh, dear, yeah.
That's what I've seen the road. She'll come out a little bit.
well, yeah, the
and she'll go
Sea-Sacks are
back
here,
in there.
so we're in good company.
Hi, everybody.
The other side, so.
All rise.
I don't have to wear handcuffs again tonight, do I?
No,
Oh,
you're all set, Larry. We won't have you wear them in public.
I finally got the ankle bracelet on.
Good, good. Check in with your probation officer tomorrow. You'll be all set. Hello, Robbie.
Oh, Bradley?
How are you?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
Lovely Katie. Recovering.
Recovering, yeah. Oh, doing good.
Well, good. Looks like you are too.
Is it doing well?
I'll back up here.
Oh, you're fine.
No, I know I am. Thank you though. I'm gonna back up next to you so it looks like I have friends.
I'll give you $20 if I can sit next to you.
I'll give you a break. 10, I'll do it.
We'll do it for 5, Brad.
All right. It's like a reverse auction. I can be bought, Karen.
Yeah, you okay. 2? Do I hear 2?
Oh my gosh. What a night, huh?
It is.
Yeah,
It's
they
beautiful.
Finally, finally dry.
must have pulled ahead with the weather.
Oh.
Even if I miss a few questions,
You know,
I'll see them.
sit here to be certain.
If I miss one or something.
I was doing good. Brad is blocking my view.
Oh, gosh.
Yes.
Number
Not just us, but then people warmed up and started getting
Oh.
Yes. It was interesting at the end. Tom's. So what is the next bicentennial meeting? That busy.
August, the second Monday in August.
Okay.
I think it's the
And then
We look forward to seeing you.
I think I would drag her along too.
I would. We need at the last, the last 2 weeks.
I read that from Rachel.
Yeah.
So good evening, everybody, and welcome once again. I think just about everybody here has been here before. This is a little bit of a return kind of to the origins of this program. We started doing these summer evening events in 2011 as when the sesquicentennial of the Civil War started. So the first couple of years that we did this, it was, I think we call it the Civil War event series. And then when the sesquicentennial ended and wanted to continue, that's when we came up with the Summer at the Stonehouse instead. But tonight we'll kind of go back to our roots a little bit and have a presentation on the Civil War. Mark Jones, who's here to give the presentation this evening, you reached out to me, I think.
Yes.
And but he is a classical musician, plays the tuba among instruments you play.
A lot of antique instruments.
And he's played with the Buffalo Philharmonic. He's also a collector of antique musical instruments and Civil War related items in particular. So
Yes.
we're very fortunate to have him down here, and I'd like to also welcome our speaker tonight, Mark Jones.
There we go. I think everybody can hear me. I probably should use this if it's being videotaped tonight. Just because of our beautiful weather, it may be a little difficult to see, so I'll probably just repeat what the slides are saying. And the presentation tonight is Civil War Military Bands and Bandsmen. The roots of the American band movement are found in the musical traditions of Western Europe. In the middle of the 18th century, there were lots of types of wind and brass bands in European towns. These groups performed concerts and various ceremonial duties such as parades, funerals. The band tradition carried over to our country and found a renewed life. Military bands were also formed in Philadelphia and Boston, and by the turn of the 19th century, and the U.S. Marine Band was formed in 1799. At the turn of the 19th century, bands included oboes, clarinets, bassoons, all woodwinds, and drums, as brass instruments of the times were limited to the notes of the overtone series. If you can imagine, a brass instrument has valves, and before the valves on brass instruments, you had a period where keys were used, just like a saxophone. Adolph Sax, who invented the saxophone, also invented a keyed instrument known as the ophicleide, which was an early tuba. But the earliest brass instruments were just bugles or open horns, maybe a slide trombone, but you could only play fundamentals. Well, innovations in the 19th century added keys, then valves, and brass instruments finally could play the entire scale. Brass instruments were also more playable and resilient to bad weather for marching. The problem with the military bands with woodwinds was that you'd be outside in a cold day marching and the woodwinds might crack. For example, the Buffalo Philharmonic, even in the summertime, the principal oboe player has a thermometer on his or her stand, and if it goes below 64 degrees, the orchestra stops because the instruments might crack. And if you have a $50,000 contrabassoon, better to stop than have a damaged instruments. Well, these new brass instruments were integrated into wind bands and then all brass band ensembles in our country. Now here's a real classic figure. This is Louis Benz, who was the bugler at West Point. He was an old timer, and you can see that his bugle was actually a keyed bugle, but he had taken the keys off the bugle. It had keys so he could change the pitches, and he was just a cavalry bugle player and sounded reveille and such for the cadets at West Point. And his buddy who's holding the bucket was Hans, and we have no information on Hans's duties. Bands were formed of fraternal organizations, militia groups, police and firemen associations, and professional guilds. The Boston Brass Band, the American Band, the Dodworth Saxhorn Band, and the Salem Brass Band are a few of the bands that were formed. And they didn't make a sound like that.
There we go. Finally dead.
Them darn Russians.
Okay. It's a mystery. Well, I'm going to pass this around, and this is from 1851 from a newspaper, Gleason's Pictorial, and on the bottom you see the Boston Brass Band, and they're all playing instruments that point backwards, and we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. Now, bands played all types of music. They were playing polkas, quick steps, schottisches, marches, for various brass instruments. And what you're being passed around, that is the from the Gleason's Pictorial, the Boston Brass Band, and they're all playing over the shoulder or instruments that point backwards, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now here's a lithograph of the 7th New York Regiment with the band in the center. A little hard to see, it being so light, but the band is over there, and that's circa 1855. At the start of the Civil War, there were very few military bands. Within a few months of the start of the war, Congress authorized the creation of regimental bands for the regular army. General Order 48, issued in 1861, entitled Two Field Musicians, and there are two types of musicians. A field musician, being a bugler, fifer, or drummer, and a band, a brass band. And the general order entitled Two Field Musicians, and a band of 16 brass band players for each regiment. These bands played a significant role for the soldiers. They were the pride of their unit, and many letters from soldiers of the time attest to the appreciation of the very good music. And here we have a Civil War fifer, and a little hard to see, but he is holding his fife right there. And I brought with me this is a Mark's Civil War fife made by E. Bach of New York. 6 holes, and they would just play it like this. And then we have the buglers. And one of the most misunderstood instruments in the Civil War is the bugle. A true Civil War clarion bugle is copper with brass trimming, single twist, and just like the gentleman on the right is holding, right there, there is a typical Civil War bugle. Now, musicians did not fight unless all heck broke out and it was a matter of life and death. However, for dress purposes, they would wear something called musician swords, or NCO, non-commissioned officer swords. And they were intended for ceremonial use and used in a fight just as a last resort. And here is such a sword. They were very thin, and they were in leather scabbards, and this would have been used on their side for ceremonial use, for dress use. Oh, and there goes a bunny. By the end of 1861, the federal government, experiencing financial difficulties, realized it could no longer support regimental bands. And General Order number 91 in July of 1862 abolished the regimental bands, but provided for 16-piece brigade bands. A brigade band would be made up of 3 or 4 regiments. Now, sometimes the bands, the officers of the bands really liked the music, and they would throw some money the way of the musicians and ask them to re-enlist as a band member. The only problem being if something went wrong and you re-enlisted, it was possible that instead of being a bandsman, you might be given a rifle and you're going to the front. So it was a little risque. The music provided by the bands during the war did much to help the cause. The services were much in demand, and they even played concerts. If the bands and the units would go to a town on march, they might play a concert and ask the townspeople to chip in, and the monies would not go to the band members, but would go to the soldiers to help pay for different things that soldiers might need or want. And the bands would play for the troops in the march, dress parades, ceremonies, civic functions. They entertained them in parks and concert hall. They provided the music for balls and dances. If the officers decided to have a very fancy ball, there were a bunch of brigades in the area. There might be a very fancy social levee and with a very fancy formal ball. And some of the bands actually found themselves in battle. And many times, a side duty of a bandsman was to be an assistant for the surgeons, and they would be the stretcher bearers and help with medical operations such as amputations. There were bands in the Confederate Army too. Confederate Army regulations in 1861 stipulated when it is desired to have bands of music for regiments, there will be allowed for each 16 privates to act as musicians, and that the musicians of the band will be instructed as soldiers and liable to serve in the ranks on any occasion. Different than the Yankees, where here in the Confederacy, you were instructed as a soldier, which meant if trouble was coming, you put the instrument down and take up the gun. Robert Lee realized how the importance of music and to the morale of the folks, and he said, I don't believe that you can have an army without music. And it was very, very popular and important for the Southern cause. Civil War valve brass instruments are classified into 4 categories by the direction of the bell. You have the bell front, like a modern day trumpet. You have a circular that sort of goes at a 45-degree angle. Upright, like a modern tuba, goes straight up in the air. And the over-the-shoulder, or OTS horns. They were made of brass and German silver or nickel silver. The over-the-shoulder horns are most associated with the Civil War, and the reason that they pointed backwards was that the band would march in front of the troops, and the sound would project or go to the rear, and especially if you were outside, it would help keep the troops in step. They could hear the music. And the inventor of these horns called them sax horns after Adolph Sax, and they were very, very mellow in sound. Here is a Civil War bell front cornet with 3-string rotary valves, with the bell going straight ahead, just like a modern trumpet. And here you have 2 pards, 2 Civil War buddies, bandsmen, having a libation or 2 here. And you have one holding their E-flat cornet and another one with a cornet. But I think they're more caring about what's in the bottle at that point. And then we have an upright brass instrument, just like a modern tuba, goes straight up in the air. And here you have it's a little hard to see, but this guy is real serious. He's got his instrument he's holding on the left. I think I played with my cat a little too much with this. But on the left, his right, our left, he's holding his instrument, and the other hand, he's holding his dagger. So this guy is real serious. Here we have a circular, or round, they're also called butterfly cornets. there we go, a little bit left there. And it goes at a 45-degree angle. And here you have a gentleman holding his circular cornet. I think it's a tin type or an amber type. And then we have an over-the-shoulder horn. And I brought something along the lines of this with me today, which I'll play for you later on. And the tubas, or contrabass sax horns, could be anywhere from 4 feet long to 5 feet long. I mean, we're talking big instrument. Now, it's a little hard to see, but as a collector, we don't find things in pristine condition. Just as your wonderful flag inside, you see the before and after. Well, this is the way a lot of times we find an instrument. It's flattened, it might be missing some of the tubing, it has a nail hole in it because it was hanging up in a barn. Lots of times you find instruments in barns and attics. And sometimes we find some unusual things inside of our horns. This is an old mummified mouse that had used the horn as a nice little house, and only when the repairman started to take it apart to restore it and said, something is smelling funny in there. And the mouse had a nice house.
Do you want me to?
Pardon?
Want me to hit your thing?
Oh, that'd be wonderful, thank you. It's the one up on top.
Next.
Now here's a gentleman with his over-the-shoulder horn, seated, and you can see just how tall it is. Even though he's seated, it's literally above his head. I mean, these are big horns. And here's another image of a fellow with his over-the-shoulder horn. And he's standing and at attention. And now here's a gentleman with an over-the-shoulder horn, but his is a small one. It would be the cornet version, or a soprano sax horn, most likely an E flat, and we believe that he is from the 79th New York. Now I brought with me this is a flyer if you wanted to order instruments. This is from, I think, 1862, 1861. You can pass it around. And it has all the different versions of the instruments. You could get them in brass, you could get them in nickel silver, you could get them pointing up, pointing front, pointing kind of circular, or pointing backward. You could get them in 3 valves, you could get them in 4 valves. This is how they ordered their instruments. And here we have a whole set of the instruments, from the soprano E flat to the B flat cornet, the E flat alto, like a French horn, a B flat tenor, like a baritone, a B flat baritone, like a baritone horn, a single B flat bass, like a tenor tuba, and then the E flat contrabass, which would be the tuba version. And of course, they used drums, and Civil War era used rope drums, or rope tension drums. And here we have some nice restored rope drums. And also bass drums, and it's a little hard to see, but a lot of times they would be decorated with an eagle on them. And the thing with drums, if you ever see an old drum with an eagle on it, the scragglier looking the bird, that generally means it's older. The birds from the Revolutionary War looked nothing as beautiful as the Civil War eagles, and the War of 1812, or the Mexican War drums. The eagles started to get nicer, and by the Civil War they were nice. The other thing is that just because it's rope drum doesn't mean it's Civil War. They made rope drums right through World War I. And the Confederate had their own drums. This one is marked 8th Virginia, I think, or 3rd Virginia. And how would you keep the band in step? Well, you would have a drum major. And I brought a antebellum or pre-Civil War drum mace, and you would keep them in step using this. The Civil War ones tended to be a little more fancy, but the maces or batons or whatever you call it was used by the leader of the band on march. Now here's a gentleman with a bell front cornet on his side, and on his left hand he is holding his music book. And where did they get their music from? Well, you had different publications. Here's a version, Peter Saxhorn Journal from New York City, and the band of a Civil War would be 2 E-flat cornets and 2 B-flat, altos, baritones, E-flat tuba, bass drum, side drum. But not all of it was nicely printed. Here is an actual piece of sheet music that came out of the New Hampshire Historical Society, Captain Finch's Quick Step by Claudio Graffola, and this is the soloist part. Now, thinking that these guys are out in the rain, in the snow, and all sorts of things, I would think that they probably at age 25 needed trifocals, because reading this, I think they must have just memorized it, because it's just about impossible to read. Now, what did a brass band sound like? I'm going to play for you a recording on CD of a serenade, and you'll be able to hear, this is played on period instruments. This was done about 25 years ago, and you'll hear how very mellow sounding these instruments are. It's so mellow that you can barely hear it. They need the relief.
Is there a power cord here? I don't have batteries.
Let me try this one more time.
I'll get this one plugged in.
Alrighty. Talk about being prepared, just in case things fail. He was kind enough to bring one.
Well, there's no guarantee mine will work. I got nothing to lose.
I'm stuck.
I might be in luck.
Oh, okay.
Not if you need that.
It's the beauty of technology. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's very hard playing these antique instruments from the 1850s and 60s very much in tune because they were not made at the same factory. It was a very cottage type industry where the fellow at the one corner might have it different than the guy at the other corner. And it takes a lot of skill to, as an ensemble or a group, to play that well together. The instruments were common, similar to what a French horn, a bugle, or a flugelhorn is, as opposed to a trombone, which is cylindrical. And the conical instruments tended to be much more mellow in sound and not as bright. Very nice music for a summer evening. So that gives you an idea. So,
You want to continue or?
oh no, we're good. Yep. No dancing. Excellent.
Do you have another?
No, that's good. No, because the next time we hear music, I'll be playing.
That's even better. I can't help that.
I don't have a spare on me. But now you've heard what an ensemble or a group sounds like of these old instruments. Okay, next slide. In the mid-1850s, there was a band in Buffalo by the name of the Union Cornet Band. The Union Cornet Band. And when the Civil War broke out, the band enlisted as the 21st New York. And that was the first regiment out of the city of Buffalo. And they mustered out in 1862. The Union Cornet Band was very popular in Buffalo in the 1850s. And afterward, they were popular, and they also became very good teachers, the leaders of the band, Peter Kramer Jr. I know he came to Hamburg and started off the Hamburg Cornet Band in the 1870s and taught the fellows how to play their instruments, how to play as a group and such. So a very important band. And it must have been a super band because one of the great instrument makers, Isaac Fisk, was taking, in a catalog in 1861, had all of the stars throughout the country of the different folks who were using his instruments. And you have people, the leader of the American band, Patrick Gilmore, the great Gilmore and such. And lo and behold, here's Peter Kramer Jr. listed. So it must have been quite a great band. Now here's Strike the Pose. This is a fellow, and this is a famous pose a lot of times musicians would have done, where they're sort of leaning on their over the shoulder. And he's from the 150th New York, and he's holding what would be a B-flat baritone horn. Now, here we have a flyer for during the Civil War. And this is a Union Ball, September 11th of all dates, 1861. And this is a typical thing that bands would do if they weren't in service. If they were back home, just as the service bands, when they went to different towns, would play concerts to raise money for the soldiers, bands back home would put on balls and social levees and such. And people would come to these formal meetings and such, and dances, paid money, and the musicians did it free of charge and such. And all of the monies would be sent to the area soldiers who were at war. Here's another gentleman from the 9th New York with his over-the-shoulder sax horn. And on his right, you can see how he's holding a musician's sword. It's just attached to his belt, and it's just for ceremonial use. Now, we're going to play a game. As the old game, Stump the Band, it's time to stump the audience. In the 19th century, we had 5 national anthems or airs. What were the 5? Take a guess. Yeah.
Oh, my grandma's.
I told
Any-
you it was before my time.
Any idea?
Dixie.
Dixie? No. That would have been for the Reds, not for the
I
Union.
know, I was
How about
wondering if
the
you
Battle
wanted
Hymn?
both halves.
Which one?
Battle Hymn of the Republic.
No. What was
Star
the fifth?
Spangled Banner.
Yes, that was one.
Okay.
Now we have 4 others.
America the Beautiful.
No? Revolutionary War song.
My Country 'Tis the Thee. God save the King.
Yankee Doodle. There you go. And there were 3 others. Let's go to the next slide, and it'll show.
Oh, hell.
Columbia, the Gem of the Ocean, which was also known as the Red, White, and the Blue. Hail Columbia, our current national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner. Yankee Doodle, the old Rev War song. And then a song by Claudia Graffola, the great New York bandmaster, Washington Grays. Now question number 2. Of those 5, take a look at those 5. Okay. Now it's playing Stump the Machine. Question 2. Of those 5 previous songs, one of those is still used to introduce a certain elected official, just as Hail to the Chief is used to introduce the President of the United States. Which of the previous 5 is used to introduce an elected official? Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. Yes, next slide. You heard this on January 20th. That is the official song for the Vice President of the United States. And when he is sworn in, the Marine Band plays Hail Columbia. All right, back to Civil War. Here we have the Elmira Cornet Band before they went to war. And you'll see they're really relaxed. I mean, you have the over-the-shoulder horns leaning against the tree, hanging from the tree, and they're just sort of mellowing out. But you'll notice the bass drum says Elmira Cornet Band. Now here's the same band after they enlisted. They're now the 8th New York State Militia Band. But the instruments aren't hanging from a tree. They're in full dress uniform. The only thing that stayed the same is the old bass drum that says Elmira Cornet Band. Same band, different outfits. I'm sorry. Here's the 13th Massachusetts, all with over-the-shoulder horns and drums. And it must be wintertime because they've got their heavy jackets on. Thank you. Now this is a scary thing. The band of the 33rd Mass on Lookout Mountain, Tennessee in 1863. You just hope that the commanding officer doesn't say, march. Because that'll be a short-lived band at that point. Now here's a handbill of an actual concert by the Second Mass while they were in Maryland. And it was a Zouave group. Zouaves were Civil War soldiers, certain units, and they would wear outfits that made them look like they were from Persia or such. They were very ornamental. And here you have the 2nd Regiment Mass Bands, Captain the Zouave d'Afrique. It's not a black unit, but it's just the grand vocal and instrumental concert. And again, they would do things like this to entertain the local citizens when they were on the march, and also to raise money for the fellows in the field. Now, we finally come to the Confederacy. This might be the bravest band in the history of the world. This is the 26th North Carolina, and they were based out of Winston-Salem. They were all Moravian musicians, and it was a small band, 8-piece. And on July 2nd, the 2nd day of the Battle of Gettysburg, while they were attending, helping out physicians with amputations and such, they received an order from the general to grab their instruments, go to the very front of the lines, and start playing music. And the Union folks, in a lot of diaries and such, said that during the cannonading and all of the horrors of war and such, all of a sudden you're hearing music of polkas and waltzes being played, and the Southerners did that to rally the troops. And actually the South had a good day on the 2nd day, so maybe it was the 26th. And Jules Levy, who was the solo cornetist, life was saved. His band book, which is in the Winston-Salem Moravian Museum, actually has a bullet that hit his band book and didn't hit him, and it was lodged in his band book. And now here's another famous Confederate band, the Stonewall Brigade Band. And this is before they left for service, when they were the Virginia Volunteer Regiment. And they still have their instruments in the hall upstairs. And now here's the band of the 126th New York. This one has just recently been identified. For many years, nobody knew who this was, but it's been found out it's the 126th.
Mark, do you know how they determined that?
There are new techniques now. Find a soldier and such where they're using AI, and they're going on the face and from different images, and they're able to identify things. It's fascinating. Absolutely incredible. And here are some of the soldiers of the 126th. And every once in a while, you'll see somebody who deserted from headquarters. Okay. And here we have the 97th New York at Camp Life in Washington, D.C. I tried to put a lot of the New York bands on. And again, they're all identified. And here we have, this is the band of the Hilton Head, the 2nd Brigade band, and the leader was Francis Saxey Pike. And he's the one that's wearing the bearskin cap in the very front. And a Saxey was a fireman. And he was a fireman back home. And as he took over the band, his nickname was Saxey Pike, Fireman Pike. And we had also black bands. And as they were called back then, this is the 107th U.S. Colored Infantry. They all have their over-the-shoulder horns. Well, however, you will notice that you do have the white leader on the very left. Now, this is an image that I acquired a few years ago, and it was featured this past winter in a magazine called Military Images, the 60th New York, and it was out of St. Lawrence County, way upstate in New York, and magnificent image. I mean, like 2 foot by 3 foot. Okay. And I was able to identify them all using stuff from the New York State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs, the Lawrence County Historical Society, a friend of mine. Everybody had a little bit, and we finally pieced everything together even the drummer boy, because at first we couldn't tell if it was a short person, a midget, if it was a drummer boy, because he's dressed quite formally, and 15-year-old drummer boy. And sadly, this one too, which once the regimental bands went out, a lot of them ended up joining General Slow's brigade band, which was based out of Alexandria, Virginia, and half of the band is still the 60th New York, and they were also featured in the Military Image magazine. And here's the band. And I did embarrass, sadly, the person that wrote the autobiography on General Slow when I asked him about, when I found this information out, and said, do you know about this band? He said, what band? And he said, don't tell anybody. I said, well, it exists, I'm sorry. And those two images, I had been contacted by the Library of Congress, and they have one of their angels that purchases things from them, and they begged me, they wanted those two images, and I decided to let them have it. So those two previous images are now at the Library of Congress for viewing. Here is the 23rd Ohio from 1862. Looks like it's in front of a bombed out building. And here's the 48th New York at Fort Pulaski, which was in Georgia. Now, I'm going to play for you a restored Civil War era tuba. The music I'm going to play was actually written for cornet, and I'm going to play it on the horn, and the horn itself is marked H.B. Dodworth and Company. It's probably 1863, 1864, and I'll play part of the piece facing you, and then I'll turn around so you can hear what it must have sounded like to the soldiers back then. I better put my music reading glasses on or I will not see anything.
Wow, well, this would be good. Lightweight, it's probably 12 pounds, maybe 10 pounds. It's very thin metal. It's solid nickel silver. I didn't bring the case because the case for this weighs about 40 pounds. And it goes in the front seat with a seat belt around it. Now here's a fascinating image from downtown Buffalo. This is the Abraham Lincoln funeral train stop in 1865. Lincoln's funeral carriage is on the left, and I've got the music stand there, but you can see, if you look real closely, the bells, the over-the-shoulder bells of the Union Cornet Band playing a funeral dirge for the event. And there was a little-known association after the war. Of course, we all know about the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic. However, there was actually one for musicians, the National Association of Civil War Musicians. And it peaked in 1890, and even though Civil War music at that time had started to die out, the old bandsmen, it was really important to them to meet up with their comrades. And with that, Any questions? I always like to end with this, where you have the Rebs and the Yanks meeting together at the 50th anniversary of Gettysburg, and once foes, now friends. Any questions? Yes.
How did everybody tune together?
That's an interesting question, because one thing is tuning is not like today, where today the standard, which a very odd story, and this is another great trivia question. The standard pitch of A440 of all things was in the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. I mean, who would have thought that a treaty after World War I would include anything about tuning instruments? But tuning could have been anywhere from A452 to A440. If you were in the dead of winter, it might have gone to way low. If you were in screaming hot sunshine or down south where it was real hot, the pitch could have gone all over the place. So they tuned as best they could, I guess is the...
So with a fork, a pitch pipe, or what?
Probably the cornet player, the lead cornet player would play a note, and everybody would try to get
So
close to that
he
person.
adjusted his, and whatever he think was it, that was it.
Exactly. Since he was the so-called leader, they went with him, whether right or wrong. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yes.
How long would they play at a time while they were marching?
Oh, it could. How long would they play when they were marching? It could be for any amount of time. I mean, they could march for in drills for 10 minutes. If they were on a long patrol, it would probably be for 45 minutes. The one thing these instruments don't have that modern instruments have are water keys or spit valves. So condensation would build up. So probably when all of a sudden everybody was gurgling, they would take a break and empty the horns out, because it was not nice to hear the gurgling going on. And at night in camp, which was interesting, here you have the Johnny Reb and Billy Yank, and if the Yankee band or the Confederate band was playing a tune in camp and the other side heard it, their band would get together and play a tune. And a lot of times they would play back and forth. So even though they were enemies, there was still some sort of kinship there, where, and I mean, they didn't have radios, they didn't have TVs, they didn't have the internet. So music was a great source of entertainment and relaxation from the stress of being in the war. Yes?
The commands and certain notes that would be played that soldiers would recognize as a command. Who was responsible for that? Was that someone from one of these bands, or did they have other buglers?
That would be the field music, and they would have separate bugler who at sunrise would give reveille, get them up. If somebody passed, taps, to a charge call, retreat call. Also, the drummers were taught different drum rolls for retreat, for marching forward, for advancing, for a charge. But the field musicians, which would have been the buglers and certain drummers, were different than the bandsmen.
Okay. And who was the famous one for taps? Butterfield? Was that it? What's his name? I don't know.
For taps, there's a lot of musicians who were quite famous. There's really not any famous one. For the drummers, I mean, somebody like Johnny Clem, the little drummer boy, the youngest person ever to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. They're more known for that. Now, there is something that goes on these days. A friend of mine in Virginia is doing the Taps Memorial, and from Memorial Day through Labor Day down at Gettysburg, they play taps at night as a tribute to the fallen soldiers, which is really a wonderful thing. Any other questions? Yes.
How hard would it have been for a common person to afford one of these? Would it be easy to afford or not so easy?
A lot of times the village band, or the town where the bands were formed, might have provided the funding for the instruments. or if they were out in the field and a couple of them got hit by bullets, the soldiers would actually collect money and buy instruments. And of course, they might have started off with a set of instruments, but throughout the war, somebody fell, somebody dropped one, somebody got hit with a bullet or such. And I mean, it's amazing that this stuff survived,
Yeah.
quite honestly, considering everything. Like you saw in the Elmira band before they were in the army, I mean, they got stuff just hanging in the tree and leaning against the tree and all sorts of craziness. So, are there any other questions?
What's the oldest instrument in your collection?
I just had a talk with him about that. In fact, on my way down here, I'm going to be playing a solo this summer, next month, on an instrument called an ophicleide, which is a predecessor to the tuba. Ophicleide, ophi meaning serpent, and cleda or clitus meaning covered or stopped. It's a tube, and it looks like a saxophone, but you use a mouthpiece. And that's from 1829, 1830. And I have a military serpent coming, which is made out of pear wood covered in leather with 6 tone holes that have ivory bushings and keys with an ivory mouthpiece. And it's by that famous maker Anonymous, unfortunately. So probably early 1800s. So
Is it European?
I would say so. The only instrument that is marked that's a serpent is in the Moravian Museum in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And we're not sure if the gentleman whose name is on there was the maker or if he was just stenciled it and it came from Europe. There's still debate on that. And their records don't show anything. So, any others? If not, thank you very much for being such a great audience, and I hope you learned a little bit about Civil War bands and bandsmen tonight. Thank you.
If you don't already have our schedule, I've got some flyers here and bookmarks. So it's got the whole summer schedule on there. 2 weeks from tonight, Dave Ruck, who's been coming for many years now, will be coming back doing more traditional music of Western Europe. So hope you can come back then.